I'm joined now by Alexandra Kazarian. She's one of Lyle and Eric's attorneys, and also by Carol Shapiro, a former parole board commissioner in New York, who has been in this game, criminal justice, for 40 years. Welcome to the both of you. I'll start with you, Alexandra. I could say, what's your reaction? Or I could say, are you popping the champagne corks?
Not popping them yet, but I'm in a much happier place than I was on Friday. I think everybody that is a supporter of the brothers and of their fight for freedom had a heavy heart on Friday, listening to Nathan Hochman speak for 45 minutes, basically just about the facts of the crime, and everybody knows them. And so going over it for 45 minutes seemed like just not the right focus. And I think that he did do the brothers a big favor by invoking Governor Newsom as many times as he did. It really did seem like he was asking the governor to take action. And I think the governor's office heard it, and he took that invitation and he did. So today I am much happier than I was on Friday. So yes, I'm very optimistic, just like Anna Maria.
Keeping in mind, as hard as it is for you, I assume, Alexandra, to listen to the DA, especially when he had some strident comments to make about the defense. He also does speak for many who disagree with your clients being released. And it's you must be very happy, but there are those people that he serves as well who don't feel the same way. And I'm assuming that you can process that at the same time as having the joy of maybe moving forward with your side.
Well, who are the people that he represents that are against it? Because there's 24 members of the Menendez family who are the victims. They are the actual victims of the case who support their release and who were very disheartened when they listened to that speech. I think that a lot of the people that don't support their release and their resentencing are people who are still in the office, who were actually involved in the case and in the convictions themselves, the underlying convictions. I think those are the loudest and staunchest supporters of opposition. So I think that when you look at who he serves the people of California, he serves the people of Los Angeles, and he serves the victims. And he's the representative of the victims. And it didn't seem like their position was being heard or being forwarded during that speech.
Critical point you make, because such a big part of any kind of parole hearing process is hearing from the victims. Normally they come in opposition. In this particular case, it's flipped. The victims, Jose and Kitty's family members, all seem to now want Eric and Lyle freed. Those who didn't have died. I believe, I'm not even sure if there's a living member at this point who is in opposition. Carol, your business is so interesting. I've always wanted to be a fly on the wall. I swear to God. That's why I'm in this business. But I've always wanted to be a fly on the wall of the discussions that parole board hearing members have. And I look at the past 35 years of these boys, now men, and I can't think of a reason why they wouldn't be released based on the laws that suggest, are they good? Have they been good? Will they be good? Are they a danger? The crime notwithstanding.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and I appreciate the transparency of this process. The reality is that they've served 33 years, which is a tremendous amount of time. And when I think about my own work and see the transformation people have made in prison, the purpose of parole or releasing somebody from prison has to be based on who they are today, not the worst time in their lives. And again, not speaking to innocence or guilt or the particulars of the crime, we over-incarcerate and keep people in our prisons way too long. And the evidence and the research is so clear that people who've committed the most serious crimes are not going to reoffend. So the fact that the governor is interested in really assessing who the brothers are today is really critical. And frankly, they've done so much, as you've said, good, and made the most of their time in custody that they, and many more deserve to go home. That's the purpose of parole. The victim voice, and as you said, in this case, it's family. The victim voice is heard at the time of trial. At the time of release, again, we're looking at who are the people are today. And I think what the exercise that has been requested by the governor, which is very different than what we do in New York State, will show that they are not a risk to public safety.
Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your screen. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.